If you plan to nurse your baby and then it didn't work out the way you had expected, you can probably relate to Krystina. She writes, I've been trying really hard to breastfeed, but I'm so discouraged. I've been pumping every 2 to 3 hours. It's so exhausting and time consuming. I want to nurse my baby, but I'm starting to feel like it's not worth it. And then I feel guilty because I want to give my baby the best. I'm just so tired. Well, Krystina, I can completely relate to all of the struggle and agony it is trying to pump and nurse, and what if your baby's not latching accurately, and just like the struggle of wanting to give your baby the best breast milk that you possibly can, and then trying to also take care of yourself in the whole process. So in this episode, we're going to go over suggestions for increasing your milk supply, what to do if your baby isn't nursing well, what resources that you might be able to find helpful both for your nursing and or pumping journey. But ultimately, in the end, I want you to feel encouraged to make the best decision for you. But if we haven't met before, my name's Brianna. I'm a fellow mom and money coach, and here we take questions from moms for moms all about money and real life. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into today's conversation. To start off, I need to tell you why the subject is so near and dear to my heart, and that's because I had a pretty traumatic experience. So I gave birth to my firstborn son, and everything was going well in the hospital. He was latching well, we were, breastfeeding well, the lactation consultant came by and checked everything. Everything seemed normal and just peachy great. She actually even encouraged me to start pumping in the hospital. That way she could answer any questions that I had, and that way I could be prepared to go home and pump, because I was interested in building up a milk stash in my freezer. So I felt very confident with my breast pump when I left the hospital. Well, that first night home, it's probably about the 3 nights by this point that my baby's, been out of the womb, and we bring him home, and I kid you not, he screams the entire night. I don't know what's wrong. My husband doesn't know what's wrong. We don't understand why he will not sleep. We were calling our parents at 2 a.m. and at 4 a.m. just trying to figure out why is he screaming? What does he need? Is this a colicky baby? Is this how it's going to be every single night? What do we do? We were at our complete wit's end. So the next morning, when we heard a little rap tap tap knock on our door, there, I kid you not, stood our lactation consultant from the hospital. We had actually left without a prescription, and she noticed our address and was like, "Oh, that's right on my way home. I'll just drop it by their door." My husband opened the door, and she heard my child still screaming, and by this time he was hoarse. I mean, he had lost his voice because he was crying and screaming all night. And she takes one look at my husband's face, and she was like, "Has he been crying all night?" And my husband just says, "Yes." And she says, very graciously, "May I come in?" I kid you not, it felt like God sent us an angel, because wow, were we way out of our depth. And come to find out, my baby, even though he was nursing, was basically starved. So she very graciously took the next several hours and taught me, how to pump, which I was pumping anyway, so I was getting milk, and she taught us how to syringe feed my baby so that way he could actually be fed. And then from there on, I knew that was kind of the route we had to go. Well, one thing led to another, and come to find out, I was exclusively pumping not too long after that, because he just didn't have a very secure latch. He just wasn't strong enough to actually nurse, but he was strong enough to at least scream himself the entire night to let us know he was hungry, because some babies, they just are so weak that they fall asleep, and as a new parents, we don't know anything different. We're assuming, oh, they're a baby, they should sleep, whereas I'm very thankful that my son was at least fed enough from being in my womb that he had enough energy to cry and let us know something was wrong. All right, so how do you address the whole pumping situation depending on where you may end up being with your own baby? Because you've come to this episode because breastfeeding and nursing is not working. So here's what I have learned. The first thing I want you to do is to reach out to the Leche League. I'll go ahead and link a resource for you in the show notes of this episode, but they are stationed all across the United States and in several different countries. Essentially, they have different chapters, and all of the women that I spoke to in my chapter were very knowledgeable, very just like generous with their time and very gracious with the experience that I was going through. I not only contacted my local chapter and different members within my Leche League chapter for help with nursing and breastfeeding and pumping, but also for clogged ducts and to get some recommendations from them specifically as a resource. So they by far are the top priority of resources that I found helpful. So I highly, highly recommend them. Now, for my local chapter, I went to a get together in person, and it was kind of funny because where I was living at the time, it was a very large Amish community, and so like I walk in to this chapter meeting, and I say chapter because I think that's what they refer to themselves as when you might, if you were with a fraternity or a sorority at all in college, like this might be bringing back memories of like a very organized, structured meeting. It is not like that, okay? At least not the one that I went to. So I walk in there and there's a group of all of these Amish women, and I am the only English girl in the group outside of the Leche League, like committee members. And I felt a little like out of place, but I knew that they were going to have the information I needed. So I brought me and my baby, and after going through some just general educational information for the meeting and having a small little like get together that was more as a social aspect, they very quickly got to the point of asking who needs assistance. And I very willingly, like that was the whole point I was there, raised my hand and said, I need help. Now, at this point in my whole breastfeeding experience, I was exclusively pumping for 6 weeks. I was exhausted. And my situation didn't necessarily have to do with the fact that I wasn't pumping or I wasn't producing enough milk, which we will talk about if that is a situation in your case. But my instance at that point was like, I wanted to move back to nursing my baby and kind of get rid of the pump. I was so exhausted that I even researched transitioning to formula and at the time when breastfeeding is free, I realized that because of our situation, we really couldn't afford it. It would be a huge challenge for us to be able to move from breast milk to formula because of the situation that we were in. So I was very committed to making nursing work because, like I said, it wasn't an issue that I was not producing enough milk. So to start off my whole like consultation with them, I told them the reason that I was there. And at this point in my nursing journey, my baby was able to latch, but when he was nursing, it felt like I was on fire. I knew it was not supposed to be like that. It should not be painful. And I was to the point where I was like, I'll take the pain over having to be on the pump. Like I hated the pump so much. But I also knew it's not supposed to be uncomfortable. So I need to figure out what is wrong so that way we can have a more successful nursing journey. And they very willingly listened to everything that I experienced. That they asked several questions, they observed my son nursing, and they really helped me work through the specific issue that was going on so that way we could move forward. And I am very pleased to say that we were able to transition very quickly from being exclusively pumping, and I could just say goodbye to the pump forever, to going back to nursing. Now, if you are having a really challenging time where you are not producing enough, even though you're pumping, or even if you are nursing, Rachel, another mom, shares, I was really struggling with my milk supply even though I was pumping every few hours. A few things I tried that really helped were power pumping. I would pump for 10 minutes, then rest for 10 minutes, and then repeat for 3 rounds. And supplements. I found that fenugreek helped boost my milk supply. You can also check out Blessed Thistle since that helps too. I do just want to say that before you use a supplement or any sort of herb or anything like that, please check with your medical provider and make sure it's safe for you. I'm not a medical professional and don't know if Rachel is either, but I just want to give that disclaimer and encouragement because I don't want you obviously taking anything that you shouldn't be. So check with your doctor first. So I will say that I did several sessions of power pumping. So power pumping is supposed to basically like replicate the experience if your baby was cluster feeding. They are going to let your body know, hey, you need to make more milk. And you're also draining your breast down to 0, which is going to help your body know, oh, I need to make more. Now, other things that you can do, of course, are skin to skin contact. And if you, for any of my moms that may be back at work, or if you're concerned about keeping your milk supply up, if you are returning to work and continuing to pump, actually looking at your baby, if you're not able to hold them skin to skin, can help with this too. So, just like seeing your baby, looking at videos, looking through pictures, basically like creating that like emotional mental bond helps your body recognize like, okay, we're trying to feed this baby, we need to do more. I really don't understand all the science behind it, but that's what I have been told multiple times, and several moms in the groups that I was in also kind of confirmed that based off of their own experience. So hey, if it costs nothing, it's definitely worth a try. The other thing is to make sure that you're having a healthy diet and that you're drinking enough fluids. So you need fluids, obviously, to be able to increase your milk supply since it's liquid. So make sure you're getting enough water. Some of the moms in that Facebook group definitely were like, oh, these drinks really helped me, or I found this drink really satisfying, and I think it also helped, whether it's the fact that they were just less dehydrated or if it actually did end up boosting their supply, I'll leave that up to their own individual experience. But some foods that I have heard that can boost your milk supply are oatmeal. So every morning, actually, I ended up eating granola because I really enjoy granola. I'm not a big fan of actually eating like traditional oatmeal, so I tried to make sure that I got oats in granola or muffins or a quick bread or some type of, like different variation. Like I've even heard some people putting oatmeal and granola in their smoothies just to try to help with that as well. Fennel seeds, I've also heard can be helpful, almonds, and even garlic, which I raised an eyebrow at the fact of like garlic, because I know that sometimes garlic can actually, like the taste can go into your breast milk, and then that puts off some babies because it can be pretty strong. So try these out and let us know how they go and which option, or if you found a new one, actually ended up working for you. Now back to the fact that the more you're able to drain your breast, the more your body knows that it needs to produce more milk. So if you're not having any success with power pumping, or if you are finding that even though you use the pump, since the pump, most breast pumps don't do a really good job of fully, completely draining your breast. A lot of people also highly recommend hand expression just to make sure that everything is out to, again, help boost that milk supply. So if you're not already using hand expression or you're not really familiar with how to do that, I would definitely recommend looking for some resources on your own. There's plenty educational options out there, or again, using a Leche League chapter as a really good resource because they can walk you through it, because that is definitely something that is outside of my realm of expertise. See if there's any online groups or forums that you can join. Find somebody in your area or another mom where you can feel support. If that's not La Leche League, or if there's not one in your local area, there were several online Facebook groups, some exclusively for pumping moms and some for both breastfeeding and pumping moms, and then others specifically only for nursing moms that I joined depending on where in my journey I was with my specific son when we were going through the whole breastfeeding journey. And the women in there not only were incredibly helpful and accommodating, but also encouraging. And I felt just like a sense of community, knowing like I'm not the only mom struggling with these problems. And there were several moms that asked dozens of questions, but also had really good suggestions of different things that worked for them. That way I could try when I was going through my pumping journey, things like, how do I increase my milk supply? Is this the best way to, clean your pump parts? What are you doing? Is anyone up really late here at 2 a.m. pumping with me? Because I would much rather be in bed. So that's why I want to highly recommend that you join some sort of community so you don't feel alone. But what if your baby isn't nursing well? So there could be several different options as to why your baby is not nursing well. And the biggest one would definitely come down to latch. So I know I've talked about it in several of my other episodes, but does your baby have a tongue tie, a lip tie, or a cheek tie? So I had no idea that there was such a thing as a cheek tie. I was very familiar before I had kids of the potential for a tongue tie, but you don't often hear very much about a cheek or lip tie. And since this can greatly impede their ability to, form their mouth in the right way, this can greatly impact the success of nursing. So it could be because of a different tongue tie. It could be just because they are very weak or they don't have the right muscle strength to be able to latch correctly or to stay attached to the breast. Like all of those require certain muscles, and depending on the health and strength of your baby, that may be a factor that your baby doesn't possibly nurse well until they get a little bit older. And I know that from different moms that I have talked to, that sometimes if it's not going well initially when they're first born, there's just like this sense of incredible loss of like, okay, knowing that they don't want to pump for 6 months or longer, because that's what their expectation was when they had their baby, was to breastfeed for that long. And now knowing like, okay, breastfeeding isn't going well, I just want to essentially reassure you that even if your baby's not able to nurse successfully for the first 1 to 2 or initial few weeks of being born, like your baby's going to grow and develop relatively quickly, and your baby might have the strength and the stamina and the muscle skill and ability to be a very successful nurser only a few weeks later. So don't feel like you have to give up on your nursing journey if you don't want to, just because it's not successful at the very beginning. But I have also talked to some moms that are just like, hey, it's really challenging, my baby's not strong enough, or there's something about our situations that's not working out, and I'm exhausted, and for my own benefit and for the best situation between me and my baby, we're just going to say, you know what? Our best option is formula. And I want to just give you that permission to do and make that same choice too. Now, while we're on the topic of the whole tongue tie, cheek tie, lip tie situation, is even if your baby was evaluated at the hospital and it was determined that they don't have any of these issues, and you're still having a challenge with nursing, I really want to encourage you to take your baby to a pediatric dentist to be evaluated, because the pediatric dentist is whom you're going to go to have them corrected, and they are able to assess much more, they have a lot more knowledge to assess and to what extreme your baby may be impacted by this. So with my second son, he was evaluated at the hospital and we were told, nope, he doesn't have a tongue tie, he's all good. I took him to a pediatric dentist, and guess what they told me? Yep, even though he's nursing great, he has a cheek tie and a lip tie, and both of those need to be corrected. So that's why I really recommend that even though you may feel very confident in your hospital professionals, like take them to the expert if you're having challenges with nursing and potentially even speech issues, because those things, the sooner they are corrected, the less time or impact is going to make on your child's speech and possibly nursing journey and development. Krystina, there was a couple of things that you specifically said. You're exhausted and it's time consuming. So I would really encourage you to just reevaluate your pumping schedule. If you are pumping more than your baby is demanding for food, you might actually be over pumping. Now, this is great when you're trying to increase your milk supply, or if you're finding that your body's just not making enough and you're trying to get your body to, jumpstart to say, hey, we need to produce more, or if you're trying to build up, a freezer stash or anything like that. But if that's not the issue, if you are producing enough and you have a milk stash, or you're not interested in creating one, and you're still pumping way more than what your baby is eating, this might be a great time to evaluate really, like, do you need to continue to pump as often as you are? Now, I know when I was pumping, there was this big fear that if you drop a pumping session because it's exhausting and you need rest, is that going to greatly negatively impact your milk supply? And in a way it can, but there was this fear that I took on myself that okay, if I drop one pumping session, all of a sudden my milk is going to dry up and I'm not going to be able to produce anymore. And your body learns to adjust. So if you don't go cold turkey and you're dropping 3 different pumping sessions at a time, your body will adjust naturally and it will produce what it needs to do based off of your pumping or your baby's needs. That's how our body was intended to work. So if you were exclusively nursing, for example, your baby would feed, and then if your baby came back and had an extra session, your body would make more to feed your baby for that extra nursing session. And it does take a little bit of time for your body to kind of kickstart and adjust to that. That's why there's this whole headache of moms going through cluster feedings, because your body does take a couple of days, I think it's a couple of days, to adjust to that. But you will also see the same thing occur when you drop pumping, but you can always add in more pumping, kick-starting and bringing in more milk to meet that demand. So to summarize that huge long explanation, ideally, if you're to the point where you're I'm ready to drop a pumping session, basically evaluate how many times does your baby need to eat, and then identify and prioritize your pumping based off of your baby's feeding schedule, because that's how it would normally be if you were actually nursing exclusively. Another question I have for you is, are you cleaning your pump more than necessary? So yes, we do need to clean our pump parts. We need to make sure everything's clean and sterile. We don't want to get our baby sick because we're not taking care of all of our pump pieces. But I picked up very quickly on this little hack from my Pumping Moms group, and that is to put your pump parts in a plastic bag and put it in the fridge, because you don't have to clean your pump every single time after every single pumping session. And man, this trick saved me a ton of extra work. So at the end of the night, I would just take everything out, I would wash it and call it good. If you're getting moisture stuck in any of the hoses attached to your pump pieces, if you actually whip them around your head, like a lasso, that takes all of the moisture out from the centrifugal force, and then you don't have to spend, because I spent quite a few extra minutes trying to get all of that moisture out of that out of those pieces, way more than was necessary, because let me just say, when you're a mom in this season, any additional bit of rest that you can get is so valuable. So let's not spend any more time cleaning unnecessary pieces that we don't need to, if there's a simple trick where we can save us some time. Now, if you're in a situation where your baby is in like an immunocompromised situation, or there's just like some other factors that you're just like, ooh, you hear that piece of information and you're just like, I don't feel comfortable with that. Like, for sure, I'm not advocating that you do anything that you don't feel safe or confident in. So yes, please continue to clean and sterilize your pump parts as often as you feel necessary. I was just at the point where I felt confident that like, oh, I can put them in the fridge. They will be safe until the end of the night when I can clean them, and they'll be good for the next day. So evaluate whether or not that may be the right decision for you based off of the circumstances around your specific lifestyle and what is affecting you and your baby. And finally, another big thing that I want you to consider, since you do mention that you are exhausted, is your stress level. So your stress, the higher stress that you are at, the more it can impact your milk supply, which was like a catch-22 situation when I was in it. So I know this can be like challenging to hear, because it's like, okay, I'm stressed out about the fact that I want to pump, I need to pump, I'm trying to get my baby fed, I'm just like at my wit's end. But stress can decrease and affect milk supply. So whenever you can, try to take this time to just like relax and rest. I actually got to the point where it would become like a specific routine for me that I started to look forward to, especially in the evenings at night when I would pump. I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down. It's going to be quiet. My baby was asleep and already in bed for the night. I would put on like a movie on my phone, and I would just sit there and just like wait to be done. And even though I got to the point where I was just like, I'm so over pumping, it was still like a portion of my day I could look forward to, because I was like, I know that this is the one time I am forced to sit down and relax, even though the rest of my day felt stressful around me. So if you're not able to adjust some of these other things that are going on to help alleviate some of that stress, maybe just like try to see if there's something that you can do to at least carve out the fact that when you are pumping, it gives you an opportunity to at least once a day sit down and say, okay, this is all I'm doing. I'm going to do something for me mentally to help alleviate some stress while I do this. Krystina, you also said you feel guilty because you want to give your baby the best. So when I hear you say you want to give your baby the best, what I believe you're saying when you like write that is that your breast milk is the best. And I, first of all, just want to like reaffirm for you that any amount of breast milk is helpful and beneficial. Like, there's been several different studies. You can do a quick Google search to find different voices on this topic to just like confirm, like all of the studies that have been done that identify like any amount, no matter what it is beneficial for your baby. However, it is not a miracle cure, okay? There are some moms that tout breast milk as like the end all be all, and that if you're not giving your baby breast milk, then you are failing as a mom. Like, that it is going to save your baby from everything. And I just want to say, okay, we've already identified that some amount of breast milk is great and is beneficial. But on the other hand, okay, our babies grow up and eventually stop nursing and drinking breast milk. And I assure you that when that time comes, your baby will also be okay, right? Like, the whole human race, this has happened to us as we've all aged. So I just think it's a little funny how we sometimes like hype up this experience in our minds and that it's like some magical cure when it's not. And not giving your baby breast milk and ending your breastfeeding journey or nursing journey with your baby doesn't mean that you aren't giving your baby the best. Because if you are present and rested for your baby, that may be the best. Like, you are the best for your baby. And sometimes for you to be the best for your baby, you have to rest and you have to do what is right for you in the season of life that you are in. And sometimes that just means the fact that like you can't continue feeding your baby in this way. You know, when your baby is a toddler, you know, they're most likely not still going to be nursing. You know, so many babies grow out of nursing around like the 6 to 9 month threshold mark. Now, some moms are able to continue much further, and that's great for them if that's what's worked for them. But I think that we need to get to the point and recognize that no matter what our nursing journey looks like, the best thing for our baby is for us to be present and for us to be in a place where we can provide for them in a way that we are also mentally available. And when I was so incredibly exhausted and when I was just like at my wit's end and contemplating, you know, can we switch to formula, and have I exhausted all of my options? And even though I was able to find a solution, that if I could not find a solution where we could get back to successfully nursing, we would have somehow found some solution to be able to move my baby to formula. Because at some point, as a mom, we cannot continue forward doing the thing that is mentally exhausting us, that is physically draining us, that is putting so much pressure on us, whether we have it from outside sources or our internal heart, that we are not able to meet this desire that we initially have for our baby. Like, ultimately, we need to do what's best for us to be able to take care of our baby the best in that season. And sometimes that is like letting this thing go. If you hear nothing else from this entire episode, ultimately, I just want to validate the fact that like you make the best decision for you based off of the circumstances that you're in and whatever season of life that you're in for you and your baby. Because fed is best and mommies really do need their rest. But if you've made it to this point in the episode, I would really love it if you can relate to anything that I happen to say, to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below and just contribute to this conversation for Krystina or any other moms that happen to come across this episode. If you have been working on filling up that freezer stash because you're going to be returning to work and your maternity leave is quickly coming to a close, then in the back of your mind, you might be concerned about different costs and considerations for daycare. So if you're interested in that episode, then I'll link that one up next. But until we hang out again, create your own heart home.